nationwide, women are outvoting men by 10 points in the early vote. And that is decisive right there. I mean, that if they all vote for Harris, that swings the election. In Pennsylvania, women are ahead of men by 13 points in the early vote. In Georgia, they're up by 12 points in the last numbers I saw. And those are, key swing states. So I think we're really seeing a motivation gap, not just a gender gap, but a motivation gap, because women are angry and they're motivated and they're turning up.
Now, a new poll suggests Kamala Harris has pulled ahead of Donald Trump in Iowa, a state Trump easily won back in 2016 and 2020. And crucially, it's not even considered to be one of the 7 swing states we've spoken so much about here on Breakfast. The poll by the Des Moines Register newspaper indicates that women who are older and politically independent are driving a late shift towards Kamala Harris. Well, let's look at the gender divide in the US election and the extent to which the female vote could decide the outcome. Sarah Churchwell is an American academic, an author and professor of public humanities and American literature at the University of London. Morning, Sarah.
Good morning.
Thanks for being with us. What role do you think women are going to be playing in this presidential election?
I think it's increasingly clear that women are going to be playing a deciding role in this election. I think it is very likely to be one that the candidates stand or fall on the basis of how women vote. We saw that in the 2022 midterms after the Dobbs decision, which is reversed Roe v. Wade, and obviously is what's driving so much motivation among women voters in the U.S. right now. And we're seeing a very large gender gap in early voting, and that is also reflected in that Iowa poll that dropped last night and kind of sent shockwaves through the polling community, the political community in the U.S. overnight, is all driven by women coming out in droves.
And I mean, it's worth saying that the poll that was carried out previously has been pretty accurate. Of course, it doesn't mean it's going to be accurate this time, but historically has generally called things right. You mentioned about the early voting trends. 70 million people have voted already in the US, which is clearly a huge number. How much do we know about the types of people who vote early? And does that benefit a certain... I mean, I know in the past, Donald Trump told people in the last election, don't bother voting early, which I think came back to bite him a little bit.
Yeah, it did. And now he's trying to get people to vote early, and it doesn't seem to be working that well. So what we're seeing is that, and it's worth underscoring what you said, that the pollster in Des Moines, at the Des Moines Register, her name is Ann Seltzer, and she's kind of a guru among pollsters. They really, really respect her. And that's partly, again, why it was such a shocking decision, as you say, because Iowa's not even supposed to be in play. And she's talking about an expanded vote. She's saying that this is not Republicans flipping for Harris. It's new voters coming out and breaking hard for Harris. And that's what we're also seeing in the early voting trends, a large gender gap. We can see, because they know who has sent in the votes, even if they haven't yet seen who they voted for. So you can extrapolate to a certain extent without being certain who they actually, chose. But if you're seeing large numbers of young women coming out early to vote, it's unlikely that, young women voters are being motivated to vote for Trump the first time. So by and large, we can expect them to be Harris voters. And across the country, what we're seeing is that nationwide, women are outvoting men by 10 points in the early vote. And that is decisive right there. I mean, that if they all vote for Harris, that swings the election. In Pennsylvania, women are ahead of men by 13 points in the early vote. In Georgia, they're up by 12 points in the last numbers I saw. And those are, key swing states. So I think we're really seeing a motivation gap, not just a gender gap, but a motivation gap, because women are angry and they're motivated and they're turning up.
And do you think that is primarily down to the issue of abortion rights?
I think it's unquestionably down to the issue. It's not just abortion rights, and I think we want to be really clear about this. And I'm not trying to be pedantic.
No,
but
go ahead.
It's about an assault on bodily freedom, right? We're seeing women who are not going for abortions, who are not trying to have elective abortions, who are dying from miscarriages, who are dying from treatable complications with pregnancies, ectopic pregnancies, things that in the modern age women should not be dying from with modern medicine, and doctors are being stymied from caring for them properly because they're having to make decisions about, because some of the laws say things like the women can only be treated if they're on the verge of death. Well, how does a doctor decide when you're on the verge of death? And the doctor has to wait for you to be on the verge of death to treat you. And people are seeing this. It's happening, unfortunately, on an increasing basis. And so women are seeing this around the country. They're seeing their friends, their family. They're seeing stories about this, that this is not just a question of women's rights to get abortion. It is women's right to the medical care in their reproductive health that they need, and women are dying. And that is I'm not trying to be facetious here, but that is motivating.
Yeah, of course. Will has just got in touch saying the New York Times reported that white women are the largest voting bloc in the US. They've consistently voted for Trump, more than half in 2020, and more than voted for Hillary Clinton in 2016. Is that true? And why are then white women turning against Trump? Is it because Trump isn't defending those rights?
Yeah, exactly that. I mean, the caller is absolutely right. The white women did break for Trump in both 2016, and in fact, they carried the election for Trump in 2016 and in 2020. But neither of those outcomes is post Dobbs, right? Everything changed. There was a political earthquake 2 years ago. You have a huge, external factor, if you like, that has totally come in and changed the game. And that's what we saw in 2022, when in the midterms, the pollsters really underestimated. They thought there was going to be a red wave. They thought there was going to be a pushback against Biden, and there wasn't, because they massively underestimated women's turnout. And they underestimated the degree to which, when reproductive freedom was on the ballot, the Democrats were winning every single special election, what you call a by-election. Any of those elections and the midterms, Democrats won when reproductive freedom was on the ballot, and that's what we're seeing. This is the first presidential election where that's the case. So, in my view, what's been happening, the reason why we're seeing the polls so tight and now suddenly it's starting to break open, is because the pollsters weren't reaching some of these first-time voters, and particularly young women voting for the first time who don't answer phones, they don't have landlines, they're not getting reached by these traditional methods, but they are motivated to get out there and vote. And so the pollsters are relying on data like your caller there from 2016 and 2020, but that we can't extrapolate from that, because the situation has drastically changed because of the overturning of Roe.
We heard earlier on from the Democrat political strategist and fundraiser Lindy Lee. She was speaking to a Republican strategist, Amy Koch, who we've spoken to every week for the last few weeks. She was, I think giddy is a bit too strong a word, but she was incredibly optimistic. And Amy Koch, the Republican strategist, was going, just calm down. This is still very, very close. Are Democrats getting carried away?
Look, I hope not. I think that, and I think you're absolutely right. We need to be cautious. I mean, this is one poll basically, and some, early trends, right? So these numbers can close on election day, right? I mean, we may see, obviously millions of people are going to vote on the day, and that's going to change the numbers. So, are there going to be enough men showing up on election day to overcome this early lead? That's a question, but it certainly could happen. It's certainly possible. Could Ann Seltzer, who is the guru of pollsters in Iowa, could she have gotten it wrong and have an outlier poll? These things are all possible, but the trends are looking very good. So I saw a good thing last night where in Wisconsin, the Democrats are saying that instead of being cautiously optimistic, they're nauseously optimistic, because everybody's really, really anxious about this outcome. And I think nobody can think that we're going to romp to victory, and we still have to push for every vote, and Donald Trump is going to get a lot of votes. So nobody knows, obviously, how close it's going to be, but I increasingly think with these trends that we're not going to see the nail biter that we thought we were going to see. And if the Seltzer poll is right, and because she's saying that Harris is going to win Iowa, which, as you said, isn't even supposed to be a swing state. She says Harris is going to win Iowa by 3 points. If that's accurate, then we're going to be looking at a trend, because Iowa won't be the only state in which that's true. And we might actually see a more decisive and indeed swifter outcome than we thought. We might even know on Tuesday night. I'm not saying it's a landslide, but I'm saying the trends are very positive for Harris supporters.
Very interesting. Sarah, thank you so much for speaking to us this morning.
Thank you.
Really grateful to you. That's Sarah Churchwell, an American academic, author and professor of public humanities and American literature at the University of London. So it's really interesting to watch in these next couple of days the role of the female vote. And I think we've heard this several times, actually, over the last few days, last week or so, that reversal of Roe versus Wade, it's not just about abortion rights. Sarah Churchwell said there, this is about women who are not being able to get medical care in the United States because that has been overturned until they are at the state of virtually dying. So if you're having a miscarriage, you're not choosing to have an abortion, women are dying as a result of that. And it means that particularly first-time voters, young women in the United States who have been maybe independent in the past or clearly haven't voted before, they are more inclined now to go towards Kamala Harris and her views on abortion rights and medical rights for women's bodies. It's absolutely fascinating to see how much that will play. When you look at the stats of the role that women's votes have played in the last elections, it really does. Well, it opens things up. I mean, it's still so close, isn't it? So close. But it is a really interesting angle on that nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you were hearing there, women are angry and motivated. And if you've got a block of voters that are angry and motivated, that's very difficult to actually contend with. So it's really, really fascinating.